Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our second CFR training webinar session for the 2023 calendar year consolidated fiscal report. Yesterday's session went well and we went over some good topics. We also had a pretty good sized crowd. That session's recording will be posted shortly along with today's session on YouTube. We will send an email out to all providers notifying them of when they are available and where they can be found. Today, we will have approximately over 800 attendees again. So hopefully today's session is just as beneficial for you. My name is Alpa Amin. I am one of the representatives for OPWDD and will be hosting today's webinar. Today's NY State representative will be as follows. Representing OSF, Paul Green, Paul Sutton, Lisa Vickery. Representing OMH, Michal Zielinski, Josh Becker, and Hoffman. Representing OPWDD, Francis Vasillo, Kenneth Glinmeyer, Alpa Amin, and Emily Seward. Representing SED, Catherine Cochran, Mackenzie Bisler. Representing DOH, Jeffrey Nicholson, Nicole Miliusi. Also, we have a survey that will pop up at the end of the event. We would greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill out the survey so that we can continue to make this training better each time. Session 2 will cover CFR's Web Utilities menu, general and agency-specific changes, highlights, and supplements, SUPP-1 schedule, claim reporting, DMH2, and DMH3. This slide is important, and hopefully you have had the opportunity to check out previous Q&As that have been posted on the OMH website. We strongly encourage all attendees to ask questions through the Q&A function in the webinar. It is on your right-hand side of your screen, and you might have to click the arrow next to the Q&A to open up the dialog box. If you don't see it, click the three dots at the bottom right of the WebEx and then click Q&A. We will not be answering questions today, but plan on answering all the questions and posting answer online along with a recording of this webinar so that everyone can get the benefit of this webinar and the questions asked. This is always good to know when you have a question. This slide shows how to contact each agency. Most of us are still working hybrid schedules, so all the agencies prefer email contact. New York State Office of Children and Family Service Providers may submit questions regarding their CFR submissions to the OMH CFR unit. New York State Department of Health providers may submit questions regarding their CFR submissions by email to DOH email address listed on this slide. Any questions related to the claims can go to the contacts listed on the slide. As noted on the previous slide, email would be preferred method. By end of this seminar, we hope to accomplish the following goals. Provide NYS agency contact information for specific questions not covered during this training session. Identify any major changes that have occurred since the release of January 1, 2022 to December 31, 22 CFR manual. Discuss important policies, principles, rules regarding completion of the CFR via CFR web. Help providers become familiar with the claiming and supplemental schedules. I will now pass on the presenting to our first panelist for today's session.
Hi, my name is Emily Seward from OPWDD, and I will begin today with the Utilities menu in CFRS Web. The following functions shown here can be found on the Utilities menu You will notice on this screenshot that the Submit button is grayed out. This function will not be available until the CFR has passed all final validations and a DCN has been assigned. Also note that this function is only available to CFRS users that have been assigned the submitter role. In the DMH1 to DMH2 transfer, to begin selecting programs, you will first need to select the appropriate state agency from the drop-down up top. Next, select the programs you would like to transfer. Below, either select percentage or units of service for the program allocation. Lastly, select the county from the drop-down and enter the percentage or units of service and hit the Transfer Program button. If you need to add a county, click the Add a County yellow button on the bottom. Next is the Import Data from Text File feature. To begin importing, select the Import File type from the drop-down. You will then be able to browse your desktop to select the file. Once the correct file has been selected, you can click the Import button to begin. More information on how to format and import data from a text file can be found in the Help feature, which can be accessed at the bottom of the menu. The Export to CSV function will create a spreadsheet from the entered CFR data. Click the Schedule and then the Export button. A file will then show on the bottom of your screen. Open the file to see the newly created Excel report. You can then save the Excel report to your own desktop or edit the report. Next is the Change/Delete funding source function. The program codes will already appear here to edit. Click the pencil to edit and the trash can to delete. After the CFR has passed all final validations, a DCN will be assigned. The DCN stands for Document Control Number and will be associated with all schedules of the CFR, including the certification pages. Uploaded certification pages must have the same DCN as the submitted CFR. Depending on agency-specific requirements, new certification schedules may need to be submitted on the revised CFR submission. More information on resubmission requirements can be found in Section 2 of the CFR manual. When all required info has been inputted into the CFR and you are ready to submit, you must first go to the Validate Submission/Assign DCN function. Press the final validations and assign DCN to begin the process. You cannot submit a CFR without passing the validations. If the CFR does not pass the final validations, it will generate a list of errors that will need to be addressed or corrected in order to assign a DCN. To view an error, simply click on the listed error and it will bring the user to the error in the corresponding schedule to correct. Once all failures have been fixed, begin the validation process again, selecting the final validations and assign DCN button. If the failures are not fixed, no DCN will be assigned, thus you will not be able to submit the CFR. If there are no failures and the CFR passes the final submission stage, the screen here will appear listing the newly assigned DCN. The user can now submit the CFR. After passing final validations and a DCN has been assigned, you will be able to go back to the Utilities menu and the Submit option will now be available to use, though only CFRS Web users that have been assigned the role of submitter will be able to access. Once you have a DCN, you do not need to submit immediately. If for whatever reason you are not ready to submit, the file will be stored in the Work in in the work in progress under the status of DCN assigned but not yet submitted. In the Submit Submission function, click on the CFR with a DCN that has not yet been submitted. From there, the user can view submission, edit the submission, or submit the submission. Again, only a user with a submitter role can submit a submission. If that button is grayed out, the user does not have the ability to submit, and someone else that is assigned that role will have to submit. The ability to submit can also be accessed directly in the Utilities menu under Submit. If your CFR has passed final validations and has been assigned a DCN, select the correct CFR and click Submit Submission. The user will then have to confirm the submission. If so, a confirmation that the CFR has been successfully submitted will show. After a CFR has successfully been submitted, it can now be viewed in the submission dashboard, which is located under the menu under Home. To revise a CFR that has already been submitted, go to the Utilities menu and select Update Submission. From there, the user can check or uncheck the appropriate boxes to add or remove state agencies, then click the Update Submission section button. A warning will then appear to remind the user that adding another state agency will require programs and sites to be added and all other related data. In respect to removing a state agency, that action will result in all programs and sites related to the deleted state agency to be deleted. If you wish to continue, you would then select yes. If you need to edit your state agency selections, then select no. Please note, if there is already a work in progress for that reporting period with those state agencies, you will need to delete the duplicate to move forward. To view or print any schedule, you can select Print Schedule from the Utilities menu. Before any certification schedules are printed to be signed and uploaded, please make sure that the correct DCN associated with your CFR submission appears on the certification. If you scroll down, there are more print options to use, including expense total by program type, revenue total by program type, and inventory. If you need to print or view data for just one state agency or a few, you can print that info under Advanced Print options by selecting the appropriate state agency. Please note that all data that is associated with a specific agency will print when utilizing this option. If you are having trouble printing, you may have pop-ups blocked. When you hit the print button, you will notice that on the top right corner of the screen, there is a notice that pop-ups are blocked. This is usually on the address bar. If you click on that, there is a box you can check to allow pop-ups for the CFRS web. And with that, that concludes the utilities section, and I will now be passing it off to the next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Josh Baker, and I am representing the Office of Mental Health. Today, I will be discussing the general changes, highlights, and any specific changes for the Office of Mental Health and the Office of Children and Family Services. Any changes from the previous CFR manual are detailed in the recently released fiscal year CFR transmittal letter. The transmittal letter can be found on the SED link below. Please keep in mind when carrying data forward, changes to funding source codes or program codes may need to be updated. The next two slides highlight a list of internal controls provided by the New York State Office of Mental Health's Bureau of Audit to assist you in providing and detecting fraud. A KPMG fraud survey found that organizations are reporting more experiences of fraud than in prior years, and that 3 out of 4 organizations have uncovered fraud. The New York State Office of Mental Health's Bureau of Audit has provided the following list of internal controls to assist you in preventing and detecting fraud at your agency. Number 1, use a system of checks and balances to ensure no one person has control over all parts of a financial transaction. 2, reconcile agency bank accounts every month. 3, restrict use of agency credit cards and verify all charges made to credit cards or accounts to ensure that they are business related. 4, provide board of directors oversight of agency operations and management. 5, prepare all fiscal policies and procedures in writing and obtain board of directors approval. 6, ensure that agency assets such as vehicles, cell phones, equipment, and other agency resources are used only for official business. 7, protect petty cash funds and others cash funds. 8, protect checks against fraudulent use. 9, protect cash and check collections. And 10, avoid or discourage related party transactions. The recordings of prior period CFR training presentations are available at the following YouTube links. Additionally, the current CFR training presentation will be added to the OPWDD YouTube page at a later date. The written responses to the Q&A from the current CFR training presentation will be added to the OMH website at a date to be determined. These responses, as well as previous Q&As, can be found at the link below. Over the next few slides, we will discuss the general changes to the CFR manual. The COVID-19 and COVID-19S schedules have been discontinued for the 2023 calendar year CFR and forward. Accordingly, Section 33B and Section 33C have been removed from the table of contents and the manual. Section 2 for submission requirements of the CFR manual was updated to include Program 6350, Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic, on the combination submission matrix. Section 8, General Instructions of the CFR Manual, was updated to add an FAQ with instructions on how to report the New York State Healthcare and Mental Hygiene Worker Bonus Program funding on the CFR. This slide shows a screenshot of the FAQ regarding the Healthcare Worker Bonus Program. The FAQ provides guidance on how the Healthcare Worker Bonus is reported on the full and abbreviated CFRs. Please note, government entities are exempt from completing the CFR 2A and the reconciliation. As a result, they do not need to report the healthcare worker bonus on the CFR. Additionally, the bonus is not reported on Article 28 or many abbreviated CFRs. The FAQ related to vital access provider revenue was amended to not be specific to OMH. The FAQ related to PPP loan forgiveness was updated to include OMH and OASIS specific information. The FAQ related to the Children and Family Treatment and Support Services programs was updated as follows. Effective January 1st, 2023, all CFTSS programs, regardless of designated agency, are to be reported on the CFR for the Department of Health. New York education law and regulations require public accounting firms to undergo a peer review of the firm's at-test services within 18 months of providing its initial at-test service and every 3 years thereafter. On the slide, there are some helpful resources regarding peer review. Section 11 CFR-II of the CFR manual was updated to include the definition and data field on the CFR-II for CPA firm registered with New York State Education Department through date was added. A note was added regarding CPA firms that have enrolled in AICPA peer review, but the peer review has not yet been completed. The definition and data field for last AICPA peer review acceptance date was added. The definition and data field for AICPA member number was added, and a graphic showing the AICPA website public file search was added. Section 12, page 4, question number 4 on the CFR IV schedule was divided into 2 questions. A, submitted financial statements corresponding with the CFR reporting period or those with an end date within the CFR reporting period. And B, submitted single audit in accordance with Title II CFR Part 200, Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. This slide details changes to Section 13 CFR 1 Program Site Data of the CFR. The predefined entry on line 79, Federal Tax Credits COVID-19, was renamed Federal Tax Credits, and not line 97, Provisions for Bad Debts, Revenue Deduction, was renamed Reserved for Future Use. Section 14 of the CFR manual was updated to the following line numbers of the CFR 2A were changed. Property and equipment net, debt to current position, and long-term debt net of current position portion were renumbered because of the addition of the following lines: right of use assets, lease liabilities current portion, and lease liabilities net of current portion. The line number changes are listed. The screenshot below depicts the changes discussed on the previous slide. The renumbering and additions to lines 9, 12, and 13 can be seen here. Added the following line to CFR 2A, line 35, COVID-19. Report the total amount of revenue and gains on the extinguishment of debt recorded in the CFR reporting period that was attributable to COVID-19 funding, grants, loan forgiveness, contributions, donations, awards, and/or tax credits. Include in total revenue and gains the COVID-19 grants awarded from the federal and/or state agencies, counties, and private foundations. The amount of the Paycheck Protection Program loan that was forgiven and recorded as revenue or as gain on the extinguishment of debt. The COVID-19 federal tax credits that were recorded as revenue and donations received as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Section 19 of the CFR manual is updated to the CFR Section 3 threshold to report all employees earning more than $125,000 was raised to report all employees earning more than $150,000. The CFR 6 Section 3 instructions were updated to require all individuals operating under a contract with a separate, related, or unrelated entity that would normally fall under the Title Code 601, 602, and 603 to be reported. A note was added to inform providers uploading a text file for CFR 6 Section 3 that any data for column 9 will require manual entry. Section 66 was updated to, beginning with calendar year 2023 reporting period, their certified community behavioral health clinic will be reported under program code 6350 as an OMH OASIS shared program. Refer to Section 8 for more information about reporting a shared program on the CFR. A CCBHC is required to file a full CFR. The percent of total patient services revenue will need to be entered on Schedule DMH1 when the data is transferred from Schedule DMH1 to Schedule DMH2. As discussed yesterday, e-sign certifications must be uploaded through CFRS Web, and the checkbox attestation must be selected. The attestation will be provided during the upload stage of the CFR certification pages. E-sign certifications will not be accepted unless they're uploaded through CFRS Web. Below is the signature attestation for the certifications pages found on CFR's web. Next, we will discuss the OMH-specific supplementals, changes, and highlights. There are 4 supplemental schedules specific to OMH. Supplemental schedules OMH1, OMH2, OMH3, and OMH4, which we'll discuss in more detail. The OMH1 schedule is used to report the total units of service by OMH programs and site. Providers can use Appendix F of the CFR manual to find units of service details for each OMH program. Units of service are very important to us. They are used to determine the cost per unit of service for financial planning. The units of service reported on the OMH1 transfer to CFR1 and the DMH1 on the appropriate lines. The units of service on the schedule OMH1 must match the aggregate total of units of service reported on DMH3 for the same program. Pictured here is the OMH1 from CFR's web. To report units of service, select the program and site from the drop-down boxes. The process will be repeated for each program. CFRS Web will automatically save the data. Please keep in mind the OMH1 is only completed for OMH programs that file a full CFR. OMH2 Medicaid Units of Service by Program and Site. OMH2 is completed for program sites that accrued Medicaid fee-for-service or Medicaid managed care revenue and should be reported separately for each. The units of service reported for fee-for-service and managed Medicaid or Medicaid managed care will transfer from the OMH2 schedule to the CFR1 on lines 13A and 13B respectively. Lastly, Medicaid units of service on the OMH2 should not be more than the Medicaid units of service reported on the OMH1. The next few slides include screenshots from CFR's web. The OMH2 Medicaid units of service is only completed for OMH programs that file a full CFR and have program sites eligible to bill Medicaid. The OMH2 schedule is set up similarly to the OMH1, except each line has an A and a B to track units of service separately for Medicaid fee-for-service revenues and Medicaid revenues received as part of Medicaid managed care. As you can see, each line has an A and a B. Here we can see the lines associated with day treatment on the OMH2. Lines include brief day, half day, full day, and collateral, home, and crisis visits. Lastly, we can see the lines for each crisis stabilization center and other residential. To delete a program from the OMH2 schedule, click the delete button pictured on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. When the delete button is clicked, the following box will appear. Clicking OK will delete the program, or click cancel to return to the screen. Schedule OMH3 client information. Enter the number of clients served by the program. This may differ from the number of admissions because a person can be admitted more than once. Caseload at the start of the current period should equal the caseload at the end of the prior period. Schedule OMH3 program without an ongoing caseload. The OMH3 captures the number of persons served by the program and site for the year. The beginning and ending numbers on lines 1 and 4 will be 0. Indicate the same number of persons served on lines 2 and 3. These numbers will indicate how many people were seen and how many left. Here is an example of a program with an ongoing caseload. Here the numbers reported may vary. Schedule OMH4 units of service by payer by program site. This schedule must be completed for each OMH licensed mental health outpatient treatment and rehabilitative services and certified community behavioral health clinic program reported on a full CFR. Program site ID number. You are to use the operating certificate number for the MOTORS program and use the OMH site code for the CCBHC program. The purpose of this schedule is to calculate safety net visits, which will be used in the calculation of the agency's safety net payments. The schedule captures units of service provided by payer and revenues earned for select payers. For the CCBHC, report the total visits and revenue for all services provided by the CCBHC. Schedule OMH4 units of service by payer by program site. The name of the line 11 was changed from participant fees, not including copays and deductibles. Next, instructions were added to multiple sections of the fiscal year 2023 CFR manual that are specific to public school districts that file an OMH CFR only. Schedule 2F CFR2 column 9 does not need to be completed by a public school district that files a CFR for OMH only. Additionally, schedules CFR3, CFR4, and the agency administration worksheet are optional. If a public school district chooses to complete any of these schedules, the data reported should be related to the OMH program or programs only. Section 1, Introduction. Instructions were added that indicate a provider that is authorized to operate an OMH program through a designation process is required to file an OMH CFR. Section 2, Submission Requirements. The OMH submission matrix and the combination submission matrix were updated to include the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic. Section 3, Reporting Periods, was updated to add guidance for public school districts that are funded by OMH via the Direct contract and file an OMH-only CFR. These public school districts may use the period of the contract as the standard CFR reporting period. OMH specific information was added to the FAQs regarding the PPP loan forgiveness. Please note, in February of 2022, OMH issued a memo that provided additional guidance for reporting the PPP on the OMH claiming schedules. PPP loan forgiveness reported on the CFR1 line 79 federal grants should also be reported on the scheduled DMH2 line 24 federal grants. The PPP loan forgiveness is then adjusted from revenue on the claim schedule by entering the amount of the loan forgiveness on scheduled DMH2 line 39 other on the predefined line. A FAQ was added that states program code 0780 special mental health care management should report activities on a single site program code on the OMH CFR for providers operating multiple 0780 programs. Also, an FAQ was added regarding the reporting of OMH federal medical assistance percentage on the OMH CFR. This slide summarizes the FAQ regarding the federal medical assistance percentage from the CFR manual. FMAP funding that is dispersed to OMH providers as a Medicaid service rate increase for one of the following programs is reported as Medicaid fee-for-service revenue on the CFR. Additionally, OMH FMAP grant awards that are dispersed via state aid contract or purchase order are reported along with matched expenses on the full CFR and abbreviated CFR on Schedule CFR2, Column 9, and are not reported on the mini abbreviated or Article 28 abbreviated CFR. In addition, FMAP funding is not reported on Schedule COVID-19. Additional information can be found at the link on the screen. Update to Section 22 DMH2. The predefined line community residents exempt income owed to OMH for current period has been deleted from line 39. Other non-GAAP adjustments. Section 27 OMH4. The name of line 11 was changed to participant fees, not including co-pays and deductibles, and the description was revised. The Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic program code 6350 was added as a reportable program on this schedule. Use the OMH site code for the CCBHC program. Report the total visits and revenue for all services provided by the CCBHC. The following program codes were added to Appendix F. 1950 Safe Options Support Team, 6350 Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic, 8360 Individual Placement and Support Employment Initiative. The following OMH program names and descriptions were revised. 2100 Mental Health Outpatient Treatment and Rehabilitative Services, 2880 Residential Treatment Facility Transitional Coordinator Community. The following OMH program descriptions were revised. 0780 Specialty Mental Health Care Management, 2730 Health Home Care Management, 1680 CPAP Crisis Outreach, 1920 CPAP Extended Observation Beds, and 3130 CPAP Crisis Intervention. Beginning with 2023 calendar year CFR, all children, family treatment, and support services programs are reported on the DOJ, the Department of Health CFR, regardless of which New York State agency has designated the provider agency or which population is served. These programs include 4900 Family Peer Support Services, 4910 Mobile Crisis Intervention, 4920 Youth Peer Support, 4930 Psychosocial Rehabilitation, 4940 Other Licensed Practitioner, 4950 Community Psychiatric Support and Treatment. Section 47, Appendix N, the following DMH funding source codes were added. 039B, Adult Community Support, Office of Prevention and Health Initiatives, OMH only. 048M, Federal Path Grant, OMH only. 079, Adult Crisis Residents, OMH only. 140F, OMH Community Mental Health Loan Repayment Program, OMH only. And 503A, Federal Grant COLA, OMH only. Following DMH funding source codes were revised. 074, Child and Youth Crisis Residents, OMH only. Section 50, Appendix Q, the instructions for exempt income, all sources except Medicaid, were deleted. The instructions for Medicaid exempt income were updated to reflect changes that apply to OMH community residence programs. The Medicaid exempt income recoveries were waived for providers that operated a community residence program in calendar years 2017 to 2022 and/or fiscal years 2017-18 to 2022-2023. Section 66, Appendix GG, beginning with the calendar year 2023 reporting period, the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic will be reported under program code 6350 as an OMH OASIS shared program. All CCBHC providers should follow the updated guidance in Appendix GG for reporting the CCBHC program on the CFR. A CCBHC is required to file a full CFR. The percent of total patient services revenue will need to be entered on Schedule DMH1 using one of the indicated allocation methods when the data is transferred from Schedule DMH1 to DMH2. OMH providers should continue to use MHPD to submit corrections, openings, and closures of programs. The programs and sites reported on your CFRs should match our concerts database. Attachment A is automatically generated and mailed with each desk review letter. It compares the programs listed in our database versus what you reported on your CFR. Any discrepancies should be resolved. Supplemental block grant and FMAP funding. Various legislation has provided additional monies to assist with COVID relief that include the Community Health Services Block Grant and the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage Share funds for Medicaid programs. Supplemental funding opportunities are available to eligible providers to assist with recruitment and retention incentives, educational expenses, and career development. The funding requires quarterly reporting to OMH in addition to CFR. The Supplemental Block Grant and FMAP funding website link provided is a valuable resource linking providers to additional funding opportunities and civic instructions. Next, we will discuss OCFS highlights, supplementals, and changes. OCFS changes. Appendix HH has been updated to reflect that the CFTSS program codes 4900, 4910, 4920, 4930, 4940, and 4950 are now reported solely on the New York State Department of Health CFR, regardless of the population served. Calendar year 2023 CFRs and subsequent periods will not be submitted to OCFS. And this concludes my part of the training. I will now pass the mic to the next presenter. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Malucci. I work in the Division of Finance and Rate Setting at the Department of Health, and I will be presenting the DOH specific changes. First up for highlights, we have the program site identification number. Use the first 4 digits of your agency code, followed by the first 3 digits of your program code. Program codes can be found in Appendix HH. Next, we have units of service. Appendix HH provides the units of service measurement for each DOH program. Providers are responsible to confirm units of service are reported accurately in accordance with the program description in Appendix HH. We just want to emphasize how important it is to have accurate units of service. We use the units of service to evaluate rate adequacy as well as other type of rate analyses, and if the values are incorrect, we are unable to do so. Next up are changes surrounding the reporting of Children and Family Treatment and Support Services, or CFTSS. Effective January 1st, 2023, all CFTSS programs, regardless of designated agency, are to be reported on the CFR under the Department of Health. This includes the following program codes: 4900, CFTSS Family Peer Support Services; 4910, CFTSS Mobile Crisis Intervention; 4920, Youth Peer Support; 4930, Psychosocial Rehabilitation; 4940, Other Licensed Practitioners; 4950, Community Psychiatric Support and Treatment. So again, it doesn't matter who the designated agency is. all CFTSS services are to be reported under the DOH. Integrated Outpatient Services Clinic. On the CFR, the iOS clinic is reported under program code 2100 for OMH, 3520 for OASIS, and 1580 for DOH. An allocation between OMH, OASIS, and DOH must be made if the provider operated both OMH and OASIS clinics prior to being designated as an iOS clinic. Programs are required to maintain support, demonstrating they have used a reasonable method of allocating costs. Refer to Section 66, Appendix GG for further instructions. Next, we have the DOH changes. Section 8.0, General Instructions. The response to the following facts related to CFTSS reporting was updated as follows. Providers that were designated to provide CFTSS to different populations, either OMH, OCFS, or OASIS, should report on the CFR based on the following. Effective January 1st, all CFTSS programs, regardless of designating agency, are to be reported on the CFR for the Department of Health. Again, we're just emphasizing that all CFTSS CFR reporting is now under DOH. Section 13.0, CFR1, Program Site Data. The below DOH predefined entry on CFR1 line 94, other revenue was added. ARPA workforce and infrastructure payments. This line detail is to be used by the following DOH program codes. These are the home and community-based services in the consolidated children's labor. So there's 2240, HCBS planned respite, 2350, HCBS supported employment, 2360, HCBS pre-vocational services, 2380, HCBS crisis respite, 2390, HCBS caregiver family advocacy and support services level 1, 2400, HCBS caregiver family advocacy and support services level 2, 8100, HCBS community rehabilitation, 8110, HCBS day habilitation. So these were a series of 2 to 3 payments that went out in the fall of 2023, and this line entry should only be used by the program codes listed on these 2 slides. Section 67.0, Appendix HH, DOH program types, definitions, and codes. The following DOH program codes were added. So these are just all the CFTSS program codes. So again, we're just going to have all CFTSS reporting under DOH. So 4900, 4910, 4920, 4930, 4940, and 4950. The following DOH program names were modified as follows. 8100 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Community Hab. 8110 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Day Habilitation. 2390 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 1. 2400 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Caregiver Family Advocacy and Support Services Level 2. 2380 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Crisis Respite. 2240 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Planned Respite. 2360 was changed to HCBS Consolidated Children's Labor Pre-Voc Services. 2350 was changed to HCBS Children's Waiver Supported Employment. And 2520 was changed to Palliative Care Counseling and Support Services. The purpose of these names changes was to have uniformity between the waiver language and the CFR manual. The following DOH program descriptions were modified, 2390 and 2400. The purpose of this modification was to clarify the difference between the two. And the following DOH program units of service reporting were modified. 2240, HCBS Planned Respite, 4900, CFTSS Family Peer Support Services, 4910, CFTSS Mobile Crisis Intervention, 4920, CFTSS Youth Peer Support, 4930, CFTSS Psychosocial Rehabilitation, 4940, CFTSS Other Licensed Practitioner, And 4950, CFCSS Community Psychiatric Support and Treatment. Again, just please refer to Appendix HH when completing your CFR to ensure that you are reporting the units of service correctly. And this wraps up the DOH portion, so I will now pass it off to the next speaker.
Thank you, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. This is Lisa Vickery from the Office of Addiction Services and Supports. Today, I'll be going over OASIS highlights and changes. The due date for the 2023 CFR financial statements and certifications is June 1st, 2024. Late submissions can be subject to various penalties and fines. Funded and non-funded providers should review the reporting requirements and potential sanctions for noncompliance at the links provided. Sanctions may include impositions of fines, withholding of advance payments, and ultimately termination of state aid, suspension, limitation, or revocation of the operating certificate, notification of noncompliance to DOH in the case of Medicaid providers. For assistance with issues or questions, contact information is listed for the Budget, CFR, FARU, and State Aid departments. A CFR submission is considered incomplete and a provider considered non-compliant until the required certification schedules and audited or reviewed financial statements are submitted. OASIS requires a new CFR-I, CFR-III, and CFR-IV to be submitted for each new DCN number uploaded. Once the initial CFR-III is received for the reporting period, OASIS will accept an attestation reporting minor changes instead of an additional CFR-III unless significant changes to the financial statements are reported. We request that all signature pages be submitted electronically through CFRS Web. Providers must keep original signature certification schedules and attestation statements corresponding to those emailed for the required retention period and must be able to make these documents available upon request to OASIS and any other stakeholder or governmental controlling party. OASIS will accept emailed PDF files of the certification schedules and attestation statements. They should be included in one PDF file and named as follows: your agency's 5-digit agency code, the period covered, DCN number, names of the cert schedules included in the PDF, and date filed. The subject line of the email should be as follows: agency code, period covered, certification schedules. The DCN on emailed PDF certification schedules must match the DCN of the uploaded CFR files and the original signature copies maintained in the provider files. OASIS providers are responsible for updating their contact information in the provider directory system. This will ensure that providers and programs receive important communications from the OASIS Communications Office and provide current contact names and phone numbers to prospective clients. Instructions can be found at the link provided. The OASIS-only submission matrix was updated to include providers operating at least one certified and/or funded OASIS program and to add the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic Program 6350. The FAQ relating to reporting PPP loan forgiveness on the CFR was updated to include guidance for OASIS claiming schedules. The instructions for CFR-III calculations of OASIS non-reimbursable costs were updated to include positive and negative vacation leave accruals to the extent that the result is greater than or equal to 0. In DMH2, line 11, the OASIS reporting guidance for the total share of agency administration allocation was updated to include, per program, the amount reported on DMH2, line 11, cannot exceed the amount reported on DMH1, line 12. DMH2, line 44, the OASIS-only instructions were updated for programs that receive state aid. For direct contract reporting, the total state share on line 44 and the local government share on line 45 should equal net operating costs on line 43. For local contract reporting, consult your county representative. DMH2, line 45, the OASIS-only description was modified. Report the amount of local government and public funds that are considered maintenance of effort support of the net operating costs. Local government funds are funds raised by the county through a tax levy or other means. DMH2, line 48, the OASIS-only instructions were updated for funded and non-funded programs. Programs not receiving state aid should report the program deficit or surplus. A program surplus is reported as a negative number. Programs that receive state aid as a direct contract should not use line 48. Programs that receive state aid through a local contract should consult with their county representative regarding DMH2 line 48 reporting. The following OASIS programs were added to CFRS Web: 4037, Low Threshold, Buprenorphine, 6350, Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic. Beginning with the 2023 calendar year CFR, all CFT-SS programs are reported on the DOH CFR regardless of which New York State agency has designated the provider agency or which population is served. The affected programs are listed on the slide. The following OASIS-only DMH funding source code indexes were added: 013B, Behavioral Health Parity; 013J, New York State Drug Treatment and Education for Adult Use Cannabis; 013T, Opioid Settlement; and 013W, Opioid Stewardship. An OASIS-only note was added to Appendix X, line number 21, stating that professional credentialing and/or licensing fees to maintain qualified staff in OASIS programs are considered allowable costs in OASIS-funded programs. OASIS allows agency-paid employee licensing or credentialing fees for the purposes of workforce development and retention in addiction programming to be claimed for reimbursement. Starting in 2021, OASIS received 2 supplemental awards under the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment, or SAPT, block grant through CRF and ARPA, collectively referred to as Fiscal Year 21 SAPT Supplemental Grant Awards. Providers are required to report as follows: core reporting. Expenses on the CFR-1 are for direct costs, and CFR-3 are for administrative costs. Revenue on the CFR-1, line 79, and DMH-1, line 25, federal grants. For claims reporting, expenses are reported in the respective category, and revenue is reported on the DMH-2, line 24, as SAPT supplemental. Because the contract period for the SAPT supplemental grant funds does not coincide with the standard funding period, you will report the expenses and uses of the funds on the claiming schedules of the reporting period in which they occur. As a result, you may report expenses and revenues with the SAPT supplemental grant funds in more than one reporting period. State Opioid Response, or SOR, is a federal grant and is distributed through OASIS's fiscal agent, the Research Foundation for Mental Hygiene. SOR is awarded by the Department of Health and Human Services, which is an available line in the detail box under CFR-1, line 79, federal grants. Like the SAPT grant, the SOR grant should also be reported on DMH-1, line 25, and DMH-2, line 24. Opioid settlement funds. The provider agency should report the expenses of the award and the corresponding revenue in the appropriate OASIS program. This revenue should be reported as other revenue on CFR-1, line 94, in DMH2, line 29, and identified as OSF. If a local government unit, city, or other litigating entities makes any awards of these funds to an OASIS provider for the purpose of providing substance use treatment, prevention, harm reduction, or recovery services, the revenue should be identified as local OSF. This revenue should not be reported on the DMH2 line 45 as local government share. To ensure accuracy, the Fiscal Audit and Review Unit, or FARU, will perform virtual visits, and the CFR Review Unit will perform desk reviews of the CFR submissions. Any areas that need additional explanation or revision will be detailed in a CFR review emailed to the provider. Failure to respond to the review may lead to withholding of funding or revocation of certification. Accurate and complete CFR data for OASIS programs is critically important for OASIS fiscal policy development and analysis. Cost report data is also requested and used by other New York State agencies and the federal government for various purposes. The following are some examples of items covered in the review of the core reports. Are supporting documents completed and submitted, such as certification schedules and financial statements? Are all active programs reported? If applicable, have the units of service been reported on CFR-1, line 13, and do they reflect the numbers on the MSDS report? Refer to Appendix E for individual program reporting requirements. Does CFR-2, column 1, lines 7, 9, and 10 match the financials? If required, is the reconciliation completed? Is CFR-2A completed? Is CFR-3 completed? If line 38, parent agency allocation is completed, has the allocation been submitted through CFRS Web? Are the non-allowable expenses reported on CFR-1, line 40, or CFR-3, line 17, adjusted out accordingly on CFR-1, line 66, or CFR-3, line 41? Are the hourly equivalents on the CFR-4 within reason? Hourly equivalents are arrived at by dividing the total amount paid by the total hours paid. Is CFR-5 completed, if applicable? Is CFR-6 completed? If so, is there an amount in column 9 that must be adjusted out on CFR-3, line 41? Is SUPP-1 completed, if applicable? Once the core reports are complete, if any of your programs are funded, then select the DMH1 to DMH2 transfer button at the bottom of the DMH1 screen to begin the creation of the claiming schedules. Transferring data from the DMH1 to the DMH2 is essential to avoid calculation errors and underreporting on the DMH2. If your agency receives state aid funding for any OASIS program, you must report all programs operated, funded or not, on the DMH2 and DMH3. If your agency does not operate any state aid funded programs, you are not required to complete the claiming schedules. After transferring the data, you can manually adjust the DMH2 if required. We would not expect adjustments to be made in the reporting for the personal service, fringe benefits, and OTPS expense categories unless there's also a change in the method of accounting. Adjustments are likely for the remaining categories. Vacation leave accruals. CFRS Web will not transfer vacation leave accruals from the core to the claim because it is considered non-reimbursable. Equipment and property. The following adjustments are allowed: addition of an expensed item in the period it was purchased, and subtraction of a non-reimbursable expense such as depreciation, interest, real estate taxes, and mortgage expenses, which were reported on CFR-1, lines 40, 44, 45, 46, 51, 52, 53, 54, 56, 57, 59, and 60. CFRS Web includes drop-down detail boxes to list the adjustments from the core individually. choose either a predefined line or select Add a Line. For each row of data, select either addition or subtraction to individually list the addition of a fully expensed item or the subtraction of a non-reimbursable expense item. The net amount of these program expenses will transfer to the respective DMH2 line 9 for equipment or line 10 for property. If the DMH1 to DMH2 transfer button is not used, these expenses may not be calculated correctly. For a complete list of non-reimbursable expenses, refer to Section 21.3 of the CFR Manual. OASIS does not allow service providers to budget for or claim depreciation and/or interest expense for aid to localities, state aid reimbursement. OASIS requires a provider to fully expense all equipment and property purchases during the reporting period. After completing the drop-down box, the net amount will populate on DMH2 line 9. CFRS Web includes the following predefined entries: vehicle depreciation, equipment depreciation, and vehicle interest. In this example, the gray worksheet box shows that the DMH1 equipment total of $13,805 was transferred to DMH2 line 9. The provider added $10,000 for a copier purchase and subtracted $17,554 for equipment depreciation. The net amount for DMH2 line 9 is $6,251. After completing the drop-down box, the net amount will populate on DMH2 line 10 for property. CFRS Web includes the following predefined entries: building depreciation, building and land improvement depreciation, mortgage and capital improvement interest, mortgage expenses, real estate taxes, and interest on capital indebtedness. In this example, the gray worksheet box shows that the DMH1 property total of $81,547 was transferred to DMH2 line 10. The provider then subtracted $80,235 for building depreciation. The net amount on DMH2 line 10 is $1,312. Administrative expenses reported on the CFR3 must be prorated to determine the OASIS portion to be adjusted out of the claim on DMH2 line 12. The prorated share for each program is derived by dividing the program's total operating cost by the total agency operating expenses, multiplying the total non-reimbursable costs reported on the CFR3 by the percentage calculated in Step 1, and then report that amount on DMH2 line 12 for each specific program. DMH2 line 12 is used to report other than property and equipment non-reimbursable expenses and the prorated percentage of non-reimbursables from the CFR3 agency administration expenses. Early retirement incentive payments and severance pay. These expenses should be reported fully on the core reports and claim and then adjusted out of the claim on DMH2 line 12. An expense considered non-reimbursable for a provider will also be considered non-reimbursable for a related party. Any depreciation expense or mortgage interest expense noted on CFR 5, Section C, columns 4, 5, and possibly 8, which was used to validate the expense in Section B, may need to be adjusted out as non-reimbursable, either fully or partially, based on the source of the expense. A review response is required from your agency. If you agree with the findings, the CFR should be revised and validated. Please obtain a new DCN number and submit it in PDF format with your written response. Once we have confirmed the corrections were made, you will be asked to upload the CFR and submit the required certification pages and/or attestation. If you disagree with the findings, please provide an additional explanation along with supporting documentation and clarification of your position. Generally, 30 days or less is allowed for your response. This is the end of my section, and I will now hand it over to our next speaker.
Hello, this is Francis Vasalio with New York State OPWDD. I work in the CFR unit. I'm going to cover the highlights, supplementals, and changes for OPWDD. This is not new, but for those of you who are first-time CFR completers, preparers, when you're doing the 0231 IRAs, it's a little unique because when you report units of service, you report not only the service days, but you can also report the therapeutic leave days and the retainer days that you're permitted to bill for. And for those of you who have the RESPA programs, 0311 and 0312, sometimes you bill on a per diem basis. So when you report those per diem days in the CFR, convert each per diem billing to 96 quarter-hour units of service. We have some programs that you're required to report on a site-specific basis. Whenever possible, you should report the expenses directly as they're incurred by the sites. There are times when you're going to be sharing staff and sharing supplies at some of your sites if they're in the same building, what have you. So we've given you Appendix FF, which gives you some recommended allocation methodologies. And first you use Appendix J to allocate expenses, but then Appendix FF is if you've got multiple sites and for the same program and you need to allocate those expenses that way. New York OPWDD penalties, if you miss the filing deadline, you're subject to 2% of your Medicaid billings. Unlike some of the other state agencies, the penalties collected by OPWDD are not reimbursed once you come into compliance. So it's really important that you do your best to have a plan in place to get your financial statements completed, get those off to your balance sheet off to your CPA, get a final financial statement, and get all the signed certifications, everything to us by the deadline. This is fairly new for OPWDD the last couple of years, but we will only use certified CFRs when we are for calculating rates or reimbursements for providers. So if you file an amended CFR, but you don't give us a new CFR II, that CFR will not be used when we calculate your rate reimbursement. Sometimes you may be making a change just to a DMH schedule or for another agency, and you don't feel you need to file a II, that's fine. But for OPWDD, only the certified CFRs will get used in the calculations. The residential reserve and replacement programs, we found that some people were using this funding and reporting the expenditures in RESPA or IRA instead of reporting them separately in the programs that have been set up for RRR. If you do not use these programs and you're spending that money, you may find that the funding will be cut off. Workforce Stabilization Initiative. There's an FAQ that's in the manual now that gives some detail as to how you should be reporting this. In short, you're going to report the personal services in CFR 4. You're going to report the, along with all the rest of the personal services, and you're going to report the fringe benefits will be included in what you report in CFR 1. However, we're going to ask you to give us the portion of the CFR 4 expenses that are directly resulting from the WSI and the portion of the fringe benefits that are directly resulting from that. And we're going to have you report those on line 68. We'll go into more detail about that in a few minutes. This is what line 68 looks like now. You can see we're we go from A all the way down to I. That's because for the workforce stabilization, there's both phase 1 and phase 2, both for the personal services and for the fringe benefits. So I'm going to go through line 68 now. 68A and B are for reporting your transportation expenses. The to from transportation gets directly reimbursed in your rate the following year, but you have to report it correctly in order to get this reimbursement. So the first step is if you contract out with someone, you use program 0880 to report what you're paying for the service. If you're using your own vehicles and staff, then you use program 0670, and you use all the expense lines for fuel and maintenance, et cetera, transportation insurance. Once you've got a total of your to from transportation expense in one or both of these program codes, you're going to allocate that expense back to the day ahead, day treatment, and pre-voc programs using line 68B. 68A is for transportation other than to from. 68B is what is for the to from transportation expense. On that also, if we find that you didn't complete that correctly and we ask you to resubmit with a correction, if you want to get reimbursed for the corrected amount or any of it, if you reported incorrectly, you're going to have to get that CFR recertified. Line 68D has to do with program administration property expenses. So some of you may have a separate location where your administrators for a program are located. In that case, you're still reporting all the property expenses in CFR 1 for the program, but we want you to tell us how much of that property expense is for the administration. Now, if you've got a space with a cubicle on the side where the program director works, you're not going to really have separate program property expenses. We don't expect to see it. This is in case you've got a separate location for the administrators, perhaps a different floor of the building, what have you. And we came up with this as a way to get rid of the OPWDD schedule that was all about property program admin, and now we just have this one line where we need this information. Line 68E, the federal government wanted to find out how much they were spending for day services for ICF residents. So if you're operating an ICF, if you're providing those day services with your own staff, it'll be easy to report what you're billing Medicaid for it. If you're contracting out to have some of those day services provided by another provider agency, you need to contact that agency to find out how much they're billing Medicaid for. And then you add those two totals together and report that on line 68E for each ICF site. So CFR 1, lines 68F and G, as I mentioned before, there's phase 1 for the Workforce Stabilization Initiative. That phase 1 covers Title Series 200. It's the direct care workers. If you've got any of you're going to have that, what you paid them in total, reported in CFR 4, the amount of that total that's from the workforce stabilization, you're going to also report on in CFR or on line 68F. And then if there are fringe benefits, payroll taxes to go along with that extra salary, and you report that on line 68G. And then we came up with phase 2, which covers job titles 100 level and 300 level, support and direct care. So it's the same thing. You're going to include the amount you paid them along with all the rest of their pay in CFR 4. You're going to include the fringe benefits they earned as a result of this, along with everything else in CFR 1. But then you're going to come to line 68H and I and tell us how much of that you reported elsewhere was as a result of the Workforce Stabilization Initiative. Some of you came in to a lot of practice during the COVID era. I think there's still some people doing it. If you're providing day services using your ICF staff, you can bill for that using program code 0093. And for a lot of you that are doing that, it may be that the only expense you have is an allocation of the staff time from the ICF. So an allocation of the salary and the benefits for your staff that work in the ICF for the time that they're spending providing the day services. You may have a few supplies to go with that too, but not a lot. There are now 2 supplemental schedules for OPWDD. The first one, it only applies if you operate an ICF. You have to give us some information about your ICF sites. If you mark that you're providing medical supplies, which almost everyone does for their ICFs, then you mark it, and then you get to fill out OPWDD2, where you give us information about the medical supplies that you're providing, including the lots of different things that are included. There has been up until now an OPWDD5 supplemental. We've discontinued that. I'm going to pause for a second because I'm sure there's happy dances taking place all over the city by OPWDD staff who no longer have to worry about this schedule. Also new this year, we've added 2 new programs, 0270 and 0271, Vocational and Employment Goods and Services, and ARPA-funded contracts. And we've added new funding source codes that go along with those. We changed the name of the existing line 68F and G that I mentioned before for workforce stabilization. We found that when you printed those schedules, because phase 1 was at the end of the description, it got cut off, as well as phase 2. So we changed the name around so that the phase would show up in the printed schedule and not get cut off. Same thing here with CFR-1, line 94. We've added these revenue lines for phase 1 and phase 2 and have the phase portion up front and for when you print. We added a new drop down for line CFR-1, line 40, health access and coordination, subscriptions, medical virtual triage services. If you have any of those expenses, you can now use that drop down for that. And also, line 68B, which is only an OPWDD line, is now listed in the required schedules that your CPA has to audit when they sign off on the CFR-II. So we're, again, 68B drives a lot of funding for some of the agencies, and it wasn't always being reported correctly. And so now we want the auditors to be taking a look at that too. I'm going to transfer now to the next speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mackenzie Beisler from the Rate Setting Unit at SED, and I'll be going over the SED highlights, supplementals, and changes. Penalties for late submission. For SED providers, the interest expense on working capital loans for late filers of required financial information will be reimbursed on a prorated basis if submitted within 90 days of January 1st for July to June filers, or within 90 days of July 1st for January to December filers. No interest expense will be reimbursed for entities that file cost reports more than 90 days after January 1st. For July to June filers, or July 1st for January to December filers. Non-reimbursable interest expense will affect the tuition rates for the tuition rate year 2 years after the report year associated with the required financial information and will apply to all tuition rates for that year. Prospective appeal, reconciliation adjustments, rates, and financial audit. Rate Setting Unit's website. Here's a link to our website. We have manuals and forms, correspondence, certified tuition rates, and online data. You can register for access to SEDFIN, the State Education Department Finance Information System, here via the second link on the slide. SED supplemental schedules. There are 2 supplemental schedules that are specific to SED. The SED-1, Program and Enrollment Data, the SED-4, Related Services, and as previously discussed, the COVID-19 S schedules are no longer being utilized and have been discontinued for the 2023 C, CFR, and forward. SED-1 Program and Enrollment Data. This schedule is to be completed by all service providers requiring tuition rates from the New York State Education Department for school-age and preschool programs. This schedule should also be completed by service providers operating infant programs. The top half of the SED-1 collects student enrollment by program by full-time equivalent, or FTE. Report total FTEs by funding source on SED-1 lines 100 to 107. Report the total days the program operated on SED-1 line 109, number of days in session. And you may want to follow along with the handout slide, number 704, as I read the notes for this slide, as there is a lot of information. When I mention SS, it stands for spring, and when FF is mentioned, it stands for fall. The enrollment figures should correspond to the tuition revenues reported on lines 69 and or 88 to 92 and or line 94 of Schedule CFR-1. On CFRS Web, for the calendar providers, the January to June period is identified by an index code, SS for spring, following the program code, and the July-December period is identified by an index code, FF for fall, following the program code. The July to December data should be further broken down by summer, July, August, and school year, September, December, on the SUPP-1 schedule. January to December filers should enter the number of days during January to June in the SS for spring school year column. On the second set of columns, enter the number of days during July and August in the FF summer column. The July-August summer program must report a minimum of 30 days. In addition, report the number of days in the full-time program for September to December in the FF for fall school year column. The number of days entered for September to December in the FF for fall school year column will be added to the number of days of the following year to January, June in the SS for spring school year column to equal the September to June school year days, which must be at least 180 days. Enrollment is reported as a full-time equivalent, or FTE. A student is counted as one full-time FTE unless admitted after the start of the school year or discharged before the end of the school year or determined to be illegally absent. FTE is calculated based upon weeks enrolled divided by the number of weeks the program is in session. And you can refer to section 32 of the CFR manual, page 32A.2. Student FTE is also prorated when a child is in a program for less than 5 hours. FTE is calculated by the number of hours in the program divided by 5 hours. Full-day programs are 5 hours of instruction. Care days are used to calculate a per-day tuition rate, which is used in the rate-setting methodology. Care days are established by multiplying the student FTE times the session days in the school year. For example, 25 students times 30 days and 180 days equals 750 plus 4,500, which equals 5,250 care days. For the calendar year providers, the number of care days for September to June will be calculated by the rate-setting unit. The rate-setting unit will add the number of session days of September to December in the FF for fall school year column to the number of session days of the following year to January to June in the SS for spring school year column. The combined session days will then be multiplied by the total of the FTE by funding sources entered for September-December in the FF for fall school year column and to the following year, January to June, SS for spring school year column. Refer to the CFR manual for examples of student enrollment FTE calculations. When reporting student enrollment FTEs for students with one-to-one aides, include the student FTE in both the 9230 program and the program the student is enrolled in. SED1 lines 201 to 903 detail the total number of classrooms operated and student FTEs enrolled by program for each SED approved classroom ratio, which should agree to the program approval letter in effect for the CFR year. Ratios student to teachers to aides. For a special class in an integrated program settings or integrated setting programs, do not include non-disabled students in your ratio. For example, a program approved as 15 to 1 to 2 with one special education teacher and one paraprofessional for 7 disabled students and one paraprofessional for 8 non-disabled students, report the ratio as 7 to 1 to 1, not 15 to 1 to 2. For special education itinerant services, also known as SEIT, on SED1, line 111, mandated SEIS or SEIT units provided, Report billable units, half-hour units on the basis of enrollment as mandated by the student's IEPs. Comparing this number to the billable SEAT units as reported on CFR 1, line 13 is a measure of efficiency. Report the actual IEP mandated half-hour units of service provided for all special education itinerant services, SEAT, on SED 1, line 115, actual CS or SEAT units provided. CFRS Web will calculate care days by multiplying total FTEs by session days. Mandated SEAT units of service should be reported by the county in the appropriate program to the student's IEP. Individual 9135 to 9319 or group 9140 to 9149. Additionally, the mandated unit of service should coincide with the actual provided unit of service. For example, if a student's IEP indicates that they are mandated for a group session, their unit of service should be reported in 9140 to 9144 if they receive services in a group of 2, or in 9145 to 9149 if they receive services in a group of 3. Actual provided SEAT units of service should be reported on a per session basis, not prorated. For example, a half-hour group SEAT session with 3 students should be reported as 1 unit of service. These next 2 slides show a sample of the SED1 from CFRS Web, which shows the FF for fall and SS for spring columns. Each column is further broken down by summer and school year. The SS for spring column is January to June reporting period, so you should not see any data reported in the summer column. This slide shows a sample of an SED1 January to December calendar filer where the FF for fall and SS for spring columns are combined for the 2 reporting years that the rate setting unit will use for review and rate calculation. Reach out to the rate setting unit if there are any questions on the combining of the 2 years. I will now discuss the related services SED4. The SED4 is broken down into 3 sections: capacity, need, and productivity. The SED4 is required for all rate-based programs except for SEAT programs, program codes 9135 to 9149. The SED4 is not required if the only special education program a service provider operates is a SEAT program, programs 9135 to 9149. Schedule RS2 does not need to be sent to SED. However, please retain a copy of this schedule for your files. An Excel version of the RS2 schedule is available at the link provided on the Rate Setting Unit's website under Manuals and Forms. For July-June filers, the FTE for each related service discipline must reconcile to the FTE reported on Schedule CFR 4. For January-December calendar filers, the FTE for each related service discipline must reconcile to the combined FTE reported in the 6-month pieces FF for fall from previous year's calendar CFR and SS for spring from current year calendar CFR. On Schedule CFR 4, related to the school year period reported on SED 4. This is a sample of a completed SED 4. RS2 information. Data from the RS2 feeds into the SED 4. These forms are used to determine the capacity, need, and productivity of related services for school-age and preschool special education programs. Instructions to RS2 may be found on RSU's website at the link provided. Complete a separate RS2 for each related service type. Schedule RS2, column 6A, total by therapy type. Report sessions in half-hour blocks of time. Prorate is needed. For example, 45 minutes would equal 1.5 sessions. Schedule RS2 has a new column, column number 13. Annual IEP mandated related service sessions not provided due to telepractice accessibility issues. Report sessions not provided due to accessibility issues related to delivering services via telepractice. And I will now hand this over to the next presenter.
Hi, this is Paul Green from the Office of Addiction Services and Supports. So that is a conclusion of the general changes and agency-specific changes. There was a lot of information there. If you missed anything, maybe due to the cheering from the end of the COVID schedule, if you missed anything, it's all in the transmittal letter. So the transmittal letter is a well-written analysis of the changes from last year to this year. So you can go to the SED website. All you have to do is Google search NYS space SED space CFR manual. That'll bring you to the website, and you'll look for the transmittal letter. And as I say, it's a well-written summary of the changes. Okay. The SUPP-1 is the last part of the core report. The SUPP-1 is upper payment limit. It's a schedule that collects data for use in the upper payment limit calculation. It's a federal limit placed on fee-for-service reimbursement of Medicaid providers. Hospitals and federally qualified health centers are exempt from completing the SUPP-1 schedule. All other OMH, OASIS, and OPWDD providers who complete a full CFR and operate any of the following program types must complete the SUPP-1. It's for specific programs for OASIS, program 2050, 2150, 3520, 3530, and then specific programs for OMH and OPWDD. And at the bottom, providers who fail to submit CFRs or submit inaccurate or incomplete information may lose supplemental UPL payments they would otherwise be entitled to. This is a screenshot of what it looks like in CFRS Web. So again, the first question is your provider agency a hospital or federally qualified health center? And if the answer is yes, then you do not need to do it. But if the answer is no, then you need to select the state agency, the program, the site, and enter the information. You'll notice the grayed out lines are lines that are calculated for you. So you're only filling in the white lines, and you're filling in columns 1, 2, and 4, but column 3 is all calculated for you. Report the number of total threshold visits by the payer. For purpose of the schedule, a visit is defined as including all services provided to a patient on the same day. So that's a big thing to note. If a provider offers a service and the patient comes in the morning and then possibly comes back in the afternoon for maybe a group session, it's still only one unit of service for that day. Okay. So that's it's not number of procedures, it's number of units of service, and the units of service are threshold visits, and you can only get one for a day. All right. There's additional information here to read, but I'm going to let you read that on your own. But the one thing I will say is telepractice, telepsychiatry, and telehealth services are counted as threshold visits. For OASIS opioid treatment programs billed under APGs, such as rate codes 1564 and 67, while often claimed weekly, they receive a Medicaid payment for each day during the week on which a patient interaction occurs. Therefore, each day of service on a weekly claim should be counted as a Medicaid visit, and a facility billing Medicaid under APG should report the number of daily visits in the total visits column. Okay. And then finally, the only time that it differs from billing per day as opposed to billing per weekly billing would be under the bundles, and that's written down below, and I'll let you read that. So that's the end of the core reporting. Again, the core reporting is the first half of the CFR, and that is basically used for fiscal analysis to compare providing agencies and counties and regions and such. The remainder of this presentation is directed towards agencies that submit a claiming document, which is the DMH2 and DMH3. If your agency does not, then you may leave at this time. So agencies that file a claiming document include those receiving state aid or local aid in the form of a net deficit funding. Okay. Agencies that do not file a claiming document include OASIS, OMH, and OPWDD providers that do not receive any state aid or local aid for any programs, and also SED, DOH, and OCFS providers. Okay. So state aid is important to be reported on the DMH2 and DMH3. If you receive it, stay with us, and if you do not receive it, then you can leave the presentation at this time. Remember to fill out the survey, and if you do not know whether you are required to complete a DMH2 or DMH3, just stay with us. It's only another 20 minutes, and it may come in handy for you. Okay. So the claim is different than the core because it's used for different purposes and it has different rules. Some of the rules are similar, some of the rules are different. For example, for OASIS, you are not allowed to report non-reimbursable expenses such as interest and depreciation. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. However, for OASIS, OMH, and OPWDD, if you're using accrual-based reporting on the claim, as well as the core, we would expect several of the numbers to stay the same. But I will start by saying the claiming process starts with the budget. The budget is what you submit prior to the year happening. It's an estimate of what you think is going to happen in this next coming year. Okay. After you submit it, they approve it and tell you that. If for some reason things change during the year, you should contact the budget department and ask them if they want a budget modification or not. If they do, they will let you know, but it's always better to stay ahead of the process. Okay. The claim, again, is submitted after the year has happened. And basically, it's a reconciliation of what actually happened compared to what was estimated to happen. Okay. So the claiming document, the DMH2, it can be created in one of two ways. You can either transfer the information from the core report and then just make changes as you desire, or you can just go right to the DMH2 and enter the information you want. We recommend that you transfer it from the DMH1 to the DMH2. This is accessible at the bottom of the DMH1, or it's in the utility section that was previously mentioned. When you transfer, it'll ask you, you're transferring it per agency, per county. So you can select the agency, then you can select the programs, and you can send them to a specific county, like Niagara County, and you could transfer these 3 programs, and then you could come back afterwards and select the other 2 programs and send them to a different county. Okay. When you're done selecting them, you'll click transfer. You can, and it will say successfully. It will also say that there's already information there. Do you want to override it? And you'll say yes, and then it'll say successfully transferred. That's fine. Now, you also have the ability to submit to more than one county by clicking the Add a County, in which case then you would be sending a percentage to one county and a percentage to another. I can't tell you of an example of when this would happen, possibly Warren, Washington County, because they're close together. But I'm here to tell you that you have the option of doing this if it becomes an issue. So you could transfer over the lower percentage. They should equal 100%. And then existing data in DMH2 will be replaced by the selected program. So you want to continue? Yes. Data has been transferred. Remember that you're going to have to edit some of the lines, okay? And by that I mean the total transferred over, but anything that had a drop-down box, such as this gold box to the right, anything that has a drop-down box, you have to go in and fill in the drop-down detail box, okay, in order to have it match up with the total that transferred over. So now that you've transferred it, you have to select the state agency, the county, the program, and then you have to select whether it's a direct contract or a local contract. Direct contract comes right from the state of New York, or the local government unit is the local contract. A direct contract starts generally with a C00, and a local contract could start with anything. Could say Niagara, the first 7 letters of the name. Once you have selected that, you will also select the accounting method. You can choose accrual, modified accrual, or cash basis. If you're switching from what you did last year, you need to get approval to do so. So keep that in mind. You would have your expenses. In this case, they transferred over your personal services. Since this is accrual base and the core was accrual base, we would not expect the personal services to change, or the fringe benefits, or the OTPS for that matter. Okay. However, the equipment and the property very likely will change. And this is because the equipment purchases are going to be expensed fully on the claim, whereas they were depreciated on the core. Okay? Similar for property. If you built a parking lot out back, you're going to want to be reimbursed for the full amount of the property expense, but we're also going to want you to remove the depreciation that was transferred over from the core reports. Here's your revenue section of the DMH2, participant fees, Medicaid fee-for-service, and again, that's a drop-down box, so that would have to be detailed. Medicaid managed care and other third parties. Additional revenues, including line 28, which is net deficit funding, state aid, and local government funding. Total gross revenue. So this is your total revenue. Your next tab is GAAP adjustments and non-GAAP adjustments. We refer you back to the manual for that. But the end result, after having the expenses, the revenues, and the adjustments, the end result is this net operating cost, line 13 minus line 42. All right, so your net operating cost, that is your total expenses minus your revenues other than state aid, okay? So in this case, you had over $1 million of expenses, and then you had $600,000 roughly of revenues other than state aid. So the net operating cost is $410,000. Then the fourth tab is deficit funding. Deficit funding is determining how much deficit funding you received, and line 49, the total deficit funding must equal line 43, net operating cost, from the prior tab, okay? So completing this is actually, it's a little complicated because each agency has their own way of doing it. OASIS, OMH, and OPWDD are the agencies you're completing this for, and they do have some different guidance. So I will go through it, but note in the handout that we sent you, and if you did not receive it for some reason, send us a request and we'll send you a handout. But it had the speaker notes, and the speaker notes included all this information. So line 44 is equal to state share. Line 45 is county tax dollars. But line 44 is your state and local government funding. Line 45 is for county tax dollars, which is different than local government. For OASIS, for funded programs with a direct contract, the total of state share, line 44, and line 44, local government share, should equal net operating cost, line 43. For funded programs with a local contract, consult your county representative. So again, for OASIS, and this has to do with the 2-year closeouts, lines 44 and line 45 should equal line 43, net operating cost. Okay. Line 46, providers' voluntary contribution, OASIS programs, line not enterable. Line 47 is subtotal, and line 48 is non-funded. Okay. OASIS, non-funded programs report the program deficit positive or surplus negative. Funded programs with a direct contract should not use line 48. Funded programs with a local contract should consult their county representative. So again, for direct contracts, OASIS, we do not want line 48 to be used. We want the total of line 44 and 45 to equal line 43. And this has to do with the 2-year closeout. Okay. For OMH, this is the line 48 is a surplus or deficit of funding over expenses. DMH2, line 43, less line 47. For OPWDD, indicate the amount of all other funding used to support the net operating costs, which does not fall into line 44 through 47 above. And then line 49, total net deficit must match line 43. So again, this is a complicated part of the CFRS web and the CFR reporting. Look at the handout that was given to you. Look at the CFR manual, and it will provide guidance to you. Okay. The final tab is the expense variance. So in this case, if the line 1, if row 1 here, personal services on a DMH1, if it changed from DMH1 to DMH2, there'd be a variance, and if so, you'd need to explain the variance. In this case, there was no variance, therefore no explanation. But for vacation leave accruals, there was a variance. It went from 8,003 down to 0, so you have to enter an explanation of variance. And this is because for OASIS providers, vacation leave accruals will not transfer to the DMH2. Okay, so that's a non-reimbursable expense for OASIS providers. Also, for equipment, it shows that it changed, and you put in an expense explanation of variance of adjustment for equipment depreciation. But then for property, it changed, but you did not put anything in, so an error code in red says that an explanation is required. Okay. Now, on a DMH2, if you made a mistake and you want to change the county, you should click on the Change County button. Okay. Niagara County, and then the new county is Albany, hit the update, and you're done. If you don't do it this way, you run the risk of creating a new county and in addition to the original county, and then you're gonna have trouble validating. Okay. Define a DMH only program. Okay. If, and I don't know of any example when you would want to use this, but if you need to use this, if you have a program that you want to split into 2 columns on the DMH2, that's called define a DMH only program. So you would select the program, 2050, and you would enter the new index code. So now you'd basically be taking one program and splitting it into 2. Okay, it's a bad example because OASIS does not want you to do this, but nonetheless, keep it in your mind, back of your minds, that you do have the ability to split a program into 2. This would be the second program, the 2050 index code 05. You would complete it as you have before, and you would keep in mind that anything, or the 2 of the 2 columns together, the 2 of them together should equal the DMH1. It should equal what you were trying to get. So if you're taking $50,000 of expense out of column 1 and putting it into column 2, you have to remember to take it out of column 1. Okay. If you need to adjust these, you can edit or delete a DMH-only site from the program site definition screen. Okay. If you wish to delete a DMH2, so if you, instead of changing the county, if you created an additional DMH2 and you wanted to get rid of it, you would select what one you want to work with, and then you would select delete. You would get an error or a message saying, are you sure? You would select yes, and you could delete it. In summary, the DMH2 is complete on a New York State agency and county-specific basis. The method of accounting must be indicated over each column containing fiscal data and can be reported on the full accrual, modified accrual, or cash basis of accounting. Direct or local contract type must be selected and a contract number entered for each reported program. It's required for all CFR types that receive state aid funding. It's not required for for-profits or SED, DOH, or OCFS providers. OMH, if any programs are state aid funded, then all programs operated must be reported on the DMH2 and DMH3. Okay. OASIS, if any programs are state aid funded, then all programs operated must be reported on the DMH2 and DMH3. However, if no programs are state aid funded, then completion of the claim is not required. Okay. And then finally, OPWDD, DMH2 and DMH3 schedules are not required for programs funded by Medicaid without additional state aid. So in other words, for OPWDD, they only want the state aid programs reported on DMH2 and DMH3. Direct contracts generally start with a C0. If there is no local contract number, enter the first 7 letters of the county name. Okay. Agency administration is distributed between New York State agencies using the ratio value allocation methodology. And within OASIS and OPWDD schedules, the software calculated ratio value must be used. Equipment may be expensed rather than depreciated. Equipment costing $5,000 or more per unit and having a useful life of 2 or more years must be reported on line 9. Additional details required in the reporting of revenue on the other lines. Line detail boxes are provided, and when transferring data from the DMH1 to the DMH2, the CFRS Web only transfers line detail box totals. Therefore, the detail information must be re-entered in the drop-down box on the DMH2. So, after you've submitted a CFR and you feel pretty good about it, inevitably you're going to get a review letter from one of the state agencies saying that they want either something explained or something changed. Okay. If you have to make a change back on the CFR1 or the CFR4, maybe personal services or CFR1 expense, if you have to make a change, well, that change will not automatically flow to the DMH2. Okay. So you have to remember to make that change in the DMH2 also before you go through the process of resubmitting a revised CFR. Okay, so keep that in mind. Finally is the DMH3. The DMH3 is the source of the funding. Okay. In this example, you pick the state agency, you pick the county, you pick the program. Now you have to tell us the source of the funding, and this should have been written on your contract. In this case, you would pick 013S state. You'd click on the drop-down box, and it would give you a numerical listing of all the funding source codes available. If you click on the asterisk to the right of it, it'll bring the most recently used ones to the top of the list. Okay. You would pick the funding source code. Over to the right, the contract type, you would pick direct or local. Again, that has to match the DMH2. And then the grayed out areas below will flow over, and you just have to fill in the white areas. Some of them don't need to be filled in, like number of persons served per year. However, some OPWDD would want that information, whereas OASIS does not. So you can refer back to the manual that might assist, or just fill them all in. Okay. Number of units of service is important. Down at the bottom left, you have change county, change funding source, and delete funding source. Okay. So if last year the funding source was 013S, but this year the funding source for some reason changes to something else, you would use the change funding source. In this example, the county changed. It went from Niagara County to the new county is something else. You would click on the drop down to find your choices. You would pick the one you want, and you click on Update County, and that would change it. So the reason you're changing the county here is because if you went back and if you changed the county up here, it's going to give you two counties. And then you're going to have trouble closing out. All right. So that's the change county, and then here's the change funding source. If last year it was 013S, and then you want the new one, you would select 013F, and then you would hit update, and it would change it. Okay. If for some reason you have an extra funding source code, if you're having trouble closing out, passing validations, you can go to the utilities menu and look for funding source codes or you can go here and you can select one. You can click delete funding source code. Okay. And it says, are you sure you want to delete it? And the answer is yes. You can always put them back in again. All right. Column to the far right, program totals for county. So for this program, number of units of service is 8,800, but over to the far right is 10,800. So that means that there must be another funding source also. So this is the first funding source, and then the second funding source has an additional 2,000 units of service, and that's why they total up to be 10,800. So you can use that to help you. If your numbers are not adding up, you can look for an additional funding source over, and maybe you have to delete it or change it. Okay. If for some reason you have a total expenses of $771,000, but this column over to the right, the total by program is $791. Then it will tell you so, and you will not be able to move on until you satisfy that. So again, that should help you. And in summary, for OASIS and OMH, the contract number and type indicated for each program on DMH2 will be transferred to DMH3. For OPWDD, at least one contract number and type, state or local combination indicated for each program on DMH3 must match the information indicated for the program on DMH2. The DMH3 is completed on a New York State agency and county-specific basis. Funding source codes are found in Appendix N of the CFR manual. Contract numbers must be entered, and contract type must be designated state or local. For each funding source, enter the person served, units of service, total expenses, applied net revenue. So applied net revenue would be all revenue received except for state aid. And then net operating costs per funding source is calculated. Total adjusted expenses, line 16, 17, and 18. They need to match the DMH2, line 42, 43. And this is, again, shows you DMH3 lines must equal the line DMH2. Okay, on that note, I will pass it back off to the host.
Hello, this is Alpa Amin again. Help function. When in doubt, use the help function. We believe this is a useful tool. Within the menu function, at the bottom, you can find the help icon. A PDF file with help contents will open in a separate browser tab. You can also click on the help icon next to the schedule name. A PDF file specific to the schedule will open in separate browser tab. Thank you once again for participating in the CFR training webinar for the calendar 2023 Consolidated Fiscal Report. In case you missed the beginning of the webinar, please take the time to fill out the post survey after you leave the event. It will help us make this training better. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted online shortly. An email will be sent out notifying you of the location. The Q&As will be carefully reviewed and answers will be posted online as soon as possible. This concludes second CFR training session. Thank you.